Well, good morning. This is Alex up in northern Arizona. I'm hanging out with Roger today. And Roger came up to our garden, and we're kind of nearing the end of the season. And so we're excited to talk to you guys about some different strategies we've learned over the years with our garden, as well as kind of show you what the end of the season crops are looking like. So while we're out here, as you can kind of see, our garden is designed in a way that we have like multiple layers, and we kind of figured that out over time. And it's definitely not like we didn't come up with the idea. I think it's something humans have been doing for a long time. And one of the biggest things, at least I know here in Arizona, I don't know if it's like this everywhere, but we really need to protect a lot of our plants from the wind, and for a couple of reasons. One of the biggest reasons is to keep the water in the ground. And so with wind, it causes just quicker evaporation of water. But also we find that, like, especially when we're planting vegetables and different plants like that, the wind just will trash them, and especially when they're young. And so we find that there's a couple different strategies we use to protect those plants. One, to keep them moist, and two, to keep from getting just completely beaten by the wind. And with that being said, we'll kind of show you what the wind does here to our grapevines. And so, as you can see over here, this is the end of the year. So there's some videos from earlier in the season where these grapevines are completely full. And by the end of the year, with the wind the way it is, and I'm sure other things, basically the grapevines end up looking kind of like this. And so they're pretty barren at this point. Still really healthy and good, but they've already produced all the grapes they're going to produce this year and everything else. But they're looking pretty spindly. And we've had some pretty intense monsoons this year, and so a lot of these leaves have been blown off. But as you'll see, this is kind of the outer layer of our garden. As we get farther and farther in, the plants are more protected, and so the wind hasn't affected them as much. And that's kind of the whole idea. These are a bit of a sacrificial lamb. These and then the fig trees, they're all extremely durable. And so typically we'll plant those kind of on the perimeter of our garden. And the farther you go in, the more delicate the plants will tend to be.
So you've got the fig, the Desert King, more grapes on that wall. You built, what is that, about a 5-foot wall?
Yep.
Where you put the grapes. You got a cherry tree, an additional fig, tiger fig, and then an apricot tree.
That's right.
And each of those are trying to angle that wind off that slope.
Yep.
And angle it away from your more sensitive plants.
Absolutely.
I'll come over here and kind of take a shot of, you can see the slope where it's going down from where you're at into the canyons that typically funnel the wind up.
Yeah, and the way that our property is set, we're really fortunate. We're kind of like dug into the mountain a little bit. So most of the wind generally will kind of go around us compared to our neighbors. Some of our neighbors' houses that are on the hills, they just get whipped, man. So we got our buddy Theodore here. He's almost 5 months old, and he is a troublemaker. So you'll see him in the video. What we've figured out, and I've kind of already said it though, is that, doing these different layers of garden and blocks work really well for keeping the moisture in the ground. And so it just keeps the wind from hitting everything so much. Wind through leaves is going to pull moisture out of the leaves. It's also going to pull moisture out of the ground faster and everything else. And so we've implemented quite a few things in our garden to protect things from the wind, as well as protect the moisture from being evaporated too quickly. So actually, one thing we're going to be doing next year, or this winter, is we're actually going to be building a block wall. And so we're going to leave this part pretty open so we still have the view. But on the sides, and part of this is going to be all block, probably about 5 feet tall. And so that's going to be pretty cool. And if you were to, be like our neighbor's house across the way, their house get so much more wind than ours gets. We're kind of up against this mountain, so it protects us quite a bit. But their house, if it's windy, their house is getting whipped. And if you're in a location like that, you know, building a hard break like a block wall or something like that is going to be kind of what you have to do in order to protect your plants. So one of our basically our second layer that we have here are these dwarf trees. These are actual like dwarf miniatures, and so they're not supposed to get super big. And as you can see, they kind of look a little funny compared to most trees. They're kind of fuzzy, or I guess furry almost looking. But these are great little trees, and you can get these, like we get most of our trees on groworganic.com. You can get all kinds of trees on there, but these are pretty cool. These work really well. And then behind that, we have a fence with a grapevine. And so the combination of these two things together here really protects the inner garden, which is really cool. And then over here, we have our chicken coop. And so our chicken coop blocks the other side of the inner garden. And this chicken coop blocks a ton of wind. Not only is it a complete cage, but we also have grapevines growing on it. We have shade cloth and other things protecting it. And so it works out really well. It keeps the temperatures a little cooler as well, and overall just really works great for protecting the garden. So we'll go ahead and kind of go in and check out the rest of the garden. And so now that we're in the inner garden space, you can see this is where we actually grow our vegetables, and you know, we have some of our more delicate plants in general. And everything in here, like as soon as you go on the other side of that fence, there's no wind right here. I don't know if you can feel that, Roger, but
I can, yeah.
it's just like there was a little bit of a breeze out there. In here, there's pretty much none.
Yeah, it's still right now. It's not a windy day, but definitely a difference.
Yeah, and so it's kind of cool if you plan ahead, and as your trees and plants grow, you can kind of create these microclimates within your garden. I think that's really the trick of growing in the desert. And so over here, this is it's kind of a bit of a mess right now towards the end of the year. These are actually asparagus shoots, and so towards the end of the year, actually really after the first harvest or so, you kind of want to let these go, and they're going to build up that rhizome that's in the ground. But the cool thing with this is it also adds protection. And then if you notice, we always have river rock in our beds for several reasons. The river rock protects the bed from pests, whether it be like a mammal or, you know, bugs. It helps with that a little bit. It also holds a ton of moisture in the soil. And so the biggest reason we do it is we kind of use it as a mulch in a way where it literally just kind of protects the ground and keeps the moisture underneath. So I don't know if you've ever just picked up a rock and noticed how, you know, it's always wet under a rock. Same principle. That's Dan. He's pretty long-winded. He's a healthy rooster.
Stealing the show. That was great.
He's a handsome guy. So, but yeah, so that was kind of our philosophy with using the rocks. It's like, well, if thank you, Dan. If rocks hold moisture, then let's use that to our advantage. And so we cover pretty much all of our beds with rocks, and that holds the moisture in. That keeps the cats from digging and pooping in your garden beds, as well as other animals as well. So it works pretty good, actually.
So, Alex, how often then do you have to water? Do you have water lines buried in here and on a system? Is it hand watered? What's your strategy for watering?
So typically we used to hand water everything, and then we did put in a system. And so you can kind of see we have like this slow drip system in here, and that that goes all over the garden. And we typically water once a day for the garden beds. And then if it needs any additional water to that, we'll do it by hand. So typically our garden beds, we have them on a dripper system. I believe they run for 15 to 30 minutes depending on the season. In the summertime, we run them every day. And then in the winter time, it's obviously going to be less. And so it kind of depends on the season. So depending on if it's a really wet season or not, we'll adjust. Obviously you want to keep the ground moist but not saturated. So it's kind of a fine balance. With the trees in the summertime, we typically water them 3 times a week, or pretty much every other day.
Okay. So are you you're going to tell us, but are you doing a deep watering then, or? So
typically we'll have them on a slow drip, or like on the little bubblers, and they'll run for 30 minutes. Okay. And you can kind of see if a tree is getting enough water. If they're not getting enough water, then we'll pull a hose out, and we will leave that hose on for quite a while to do a really deep water on them. And I don't know if you can see, but on some of our tree wells, they're like these metal tree wells that I made. What's nice about those is you can really fill them up. And so you can really fill those things up. You don't really necessarily need to do that all the time, but let's say you don't have a lot of time that day and you want to do a deeper watering, you can just kind of fill those things up and then turn your water off. So that way you don't have to watch your water. And so that's kind of cool. So we find that to work really well. I think really getting a relationship with your plants and kind of learning over time what they need is huge. We're still learning a lot about that. I think we're in the area that I'm trying to learn the most right now is the nutrient that plant needs, if it's lacking. We're pretty darn good with the watering. The watering, when you watch the plants enough, you can tell when they're wilted. You can tell when they've been watered. You can kind of tell their behavior. You can tell if it's just hot and they're wilting because of the heat, or if the whole tree is dehydrated and it needs water. So it's just something to kind of watch for with your plants. I think that's one cool thing with the fig trees. These are so hardy. So if you're looking to start a garden and you want some trees that don't require as much attention or a lot easier to grow, fig trees, not completely, like they still require attention, but they're very hardy. So there's a little bit more room for error with them. Kind of same thing with pomegranates. Pomegranates are super hardy, and if you can get them to take, they're pretty hard to kill. So you can kind of see our pomegranate this year. It is just loaded with huge pomegranates. So this is a wonderful pomegranate tree, and it just does really well. And you can kind of see a trend in our garden, especially when you get into the inner garden space. We plant our trees in the middle of the garden beds. And so we have dedicated beds like these for vegetables. But all of our other beds that are, whether they're a flower bed or they're an herb bed or whatever else, strawberry bed, those beds we tend to plant with trees. The tree's going to hold water underneath it. That's just the way they work. They're going to hold water in their roots. The shade's going to protect the ground. So it's a symbiotic relationship, which is very cool. I don't know if you ever notice in the desert, if you see any trees, typically the most vegetation that's going to be, like grass and things like that are going to be under the trees. And that's because there's water there. So that works out really good. So like with this pomegranate tree, we have our herbs underneath it. It's gotten a little bigger, but I'll trim it back, and so the herbs can get a little bit more sunshine. But we find that works really well together. We have the same idea with this bed. We plant underneath this bed. We have peppers under it this year, and they actually are producing. I wouldn't recommend putting peppers under a big shade tree. That was an experiment this year. You can see they're pretty stringy. They still work, but I wouldn't say it's the optimal crop to put under the tree. But that's what you do. You know, we experiment and we see what works the best.
Can I ask you a question here, Alex? What's the shade cloth? I struggle here in the desert to grow tomatoes. I've grown grapevines with just a couple tomatoes, and I know you've had real good success. So can you kind of talk through the lessons you've learned of how you're growing these vegetables here?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things is creating a healthy soil, and so that's something that's going to be done over years. And so you got to start with something. And so we actually start with a pretty cheap alternative. So what we have done is we've basically taken our native soil and we've mixed that in with like a somewhat of like a compost. It's more of, I don't know if you've ever seen it. They're those really big bags that you can buy at Home Depot. And they're red and they're like compressed into a block. And I'm pretty sure it's just a bunch of trees that have been ground up, or bark and some other stuff, but it's nothing like super nutritionally dense. But we'll mix that in there together, and then what we do is we buy a really good fertilizer. So we use Gaia Green, all-purpose, and then we use earthworm castings. And so basically every 3 months we're refertilizing the soil. And so basically after every crop we refertilize. And at this point, you know, anything we put in there is usually pretty happy. And so our soil is really healthy, and we've been using these same beds for, I want to say, 5 or so years now. And at this point, you know, the plants really love it.
So Alex, with the wind, you've talked about how you've layered the garden so the wind's not in here. What do you do about our intense sun?
So there's a few things we do about the sun. There's a reason we have the trees planted throughout the middle of this garden. And so, you know, as the sun, you know, rises and falls, these trees are going to provide shade throughout the day of everything in here. So that cools it off in here quite a bit. So that's really cool. What else we do is sometimes we'll do artificial shade. And so that's kind of what you see here. This is like a garden cloth, and it will block 95% of the water if it rains. Some will still get through, like it is permeable. But it also keeps the wind and the sun off of your smaller plants. And that's probably the biggest thing we've learned, actually, and also pests. And so as you can see, we've designed these garden beds in a way that you can basically create like a sealed in tent, so nothing very big can get in there. And then we just use these clamps. You can get these at office stores or whatever, or Walmart. Nothing crazy. And so basically this is like a 3-part trick here. It blocks the wind, keeps the moisture in, actually 4-part. It also keeps the pests out for the most part, and it, you know, so I got wind, pests, water, and sun. And so it does all those things. And it works extremely well. And so what we end up doing is we'll use this pretty much to the point where everything is completely settled and like established. And then what we'll do is we'll actually roll it up and only basically like have halfway. And so that way it still has a bit of a wind block, still protects it a little bit from the sun, but then it allows the plants to fully develop and grow.
Okay.
And so that works really well. And so we'll do that on each bed. We'll basically, you know, roll this back and just have a half tent set up here, and then everything can grow big, and it's still protected at its base from the wind, and it still holds a little bit more moisture in there.
Okay.
So it works really well. So that, and we find that, you know, if we really want to have a good garden, it's almost a necessity to do it this way for us.
Okay. That's a good tip, because I think a lot of us struggle here in the desert with some of those more delicate vegetables.
Absolutely. It's crazy how well this works. Building something like a garden bed that you're going to be able to secure with this might be a little tricky. There's ones you can buy. I know that they make quite a few. I'm a metal fabricator, so I just made my own.
Did you buy that like at a Home Depot or Walmart or?
This mesh?
Yeah.
I think we got this from an online gardening store.
Okay.
I can't remember the one, but it's just a quick look on the internet and you can find it. It's like a cloth. It's not. It's like almost like papery feeling, versus like it's not like a shade cloth that's like made out of like, you know, almost like a plastic material. This is like paper, and so it does have a life. You're not going to be able to use it forever, but it's pretty cheap. You know, definitely well worth the effort if you're putting all the effort in to try to grow plants.
Yeah, sounds like it's the difference maker with some of the sun that we have here and the baking high altitude, the UV that we get.
Absolutely. Yeah. I actually don't know what's going on in here right now. My wife, she does a majority of this planting, so we can kind of look and see.
She's got some small ones in there, doesn't she?
See what we got going on in here.
Oh yeah. Oh,
so you can kind of see all these little. These look like some sort of a, like a broccoli or some sort of a green that she's growing in here, and you can see this is a carrot. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen carrots go to seed, but there's millions of seeds when they do go to seed. So, but yeah, so this is kind of our strategy that we've developed over time. I don't think this is a new strategy by any means, but this is just the way that we've implemented it, and it tends to work really well. So.
That's good. I think that's the questions I've been getting from the last time you told us about your garden, is just what are the tips, what are some of the details, and I think you've answered that pretty well.
Yeah, so I mean that's really the secret to our vegetables. You know, create a healthy soil over time and protect your plants. You know, especially if you're only growing so many. When you see like farmers and they're growing rows and rows and rows, they're going to lose a lot of plants, but it's okay. You know, they're not going to have to protect them. But, you know, if a skunk gets in here, they can destroy this entire garden in a night. So, you know, you definitely want to get your plants established the best you can. Once they're established, you know, then it is what it is. So it still can get some destruction, but typically it's not devastation.
Well, thanks, Alex. I think that should answer some questions, and we'll see if there's more that come up. Maybe we can answer some more on some videos, but I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And yeah, if there's any other questions, let me know. And yeah, maybe on our way out, I can show you a couple of our fruit trees that are covered this year.